Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's Tina. And this is the very first episode of Suspects in Stacks. If you're new here, hello and welcome. I'm so glad that you found me. And I'm so glad that you have decided to take this journey with me. If you've been here a minute, welcome back. I'm a book podcaster and I'm a booktuber, and I read a lot of thrillers, but something you might not know about me is that I also love true crime. Suspects in Stacks is my brand new series, and I'm going to be regularly making videos like this where I will bring you a true crime story and pair it with some fiction crime book recommendations. So if you're interested in true crime and if you like reading, if you like crime fiction, I would say subscribe because I'm here to bring you both. Now, before I share the first case that I'm going to talk about today, I wanted to give you a little bit of context, namely, why am I doing this? It's not just to tell a scary story. These are going to be real people's stories, and I do love storytelling, but just as I'm fascinated with the thrillers, I'm equally as fascinated by true crime. I'm fascinated by the real things that happen to people, and I want this series to be a respectful place where we can honor the victims and all of those that are affected by the crimes. And that to remember, for every spooky fictional story we read about, there's probably something similar that happened in real life. For me, consuming true crime is a way to understand human behavior and to try and understand what gets people to the point where they commit these heinous acts. And at the end of the day, I guess it's an attempt to give shape to the chaos. Today, we are digging into the unsolved murder of Betsy Aardsma, a Penn State graduate student who was killed in the library at her university during Thanksgiving weekend in 1969. And this case is going to be filled with mystery, rumor, and missing documents, a lot of questions, and I'm excited to get into it with you. To help me write this, I reference Murder in the Stacks, Penn State, Betsy Aardsma, and the Killer Who Got Away by David DeCock, also articles from True Crime Database, an article on Penn State Live, the Daily Collegian, and State College Magazine. All of the resources I use are going to be listed here in the description box, but let's get into it. First, some background. Elizabeth Ruth Betsy Aardsma was 22 years old and a graduate student in English at Penn State University. She grew up in a conservative religious household in Holland, Michigan, the second of four kids. Her father worked for the state, and her mom was a former teacher who then left that profession to stay at home with the children. Friends described her as kind, intelligent, and ambitious, and she was apparently intrigued by larger world issues, and she wanted to help others. And she really was unsure about assuming the expected role of a traditional wife and mother that was expected of her at the time. She wanted to help people and hoped to work in public service. She thought about going to med school and initially went to undergrad at Hope College in Holland, Michigan, because that's where a lot of her family members went. And she had aspirations to become a physician, but ultimately transferred to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor by her sophomore year. By her senior year, she began dating a medical student named David Wright, who by all accounts was her first serious boyfriend. She initially had plans to go into the Peace Corps after undergrad, but decided to follow her boyfriend to Pennsylvania. He was heading to medical school there, and she decided to pursue a graduate degree in English. And it sounds like they talked things over, and he said that she asked if he would wait for her because she had to do a lot of travel with the Peace Corps, and he said, "I just don't know what will happen." He's in college. I get it. I am sure he carries a lot of guilt around that, and hindsight's 2020. Now, Ann Arbor was kind of this spooky place at the time also, and many women on campus worried about the murders that were taking place in Ann Arbor. There was a serial killer there during the time named John Norman Collins, who is now serving a life term in prison in Michigan. And police believe that he killed at least 4 women between March and July 1969. Betsy's family is quoted as having said, "When she decided to move to Penn State, we thought, oh, thank God, she's at a place where she's safe, not out at the University of Michigan." They thought that Penn State would be the safer choice for her, which is just so heartbreaking. Betsy had only been at Penn State for about a couple of months when her murder took place. Thanksgiving was November 27th that year, and Betsy went down to visit her boyfriend in Hershey, Pennsylvania. They apparently hung out with some other students, had Thanksgiving dinner together at a house where some of them lived, and apparently had a really nice time. Her boyfriend later reported that he and Betsy had talked about her staying in Hershey for the weekend, but they both had a lot to do. He was a med student and she had to work on this English paper, so they decided to have her go back to campus. He dropped her off at the bus station, and that was the last time that he saw her alive, which is devastating. The next day was November 28th, and Betsy and her roommate Sharon left their residence to visit Penn State's Pattee Library to obtain research material for her English paper that she had due for finals. Her roommate initially started out with her, but ended up going another way, and they decided to meet up again later. Something interesting about that day, Betsy was apparently wearing a sleeveless red dress over a white cotton turtleneck sweater, which was an unusual outfit choice for her, and Betsy's friends would later say that she dressed more casually. So the fact that she had this dress on to the library makes them think that she maybe was meeting up with somebody there, because it was out of character for her. The library was pretty quiet that day. Students had not yet returned from Thanksgiving break, and police estimated that there were about 90 students in total at the library. Around 4:45, Betsy entered the library stacks, and it's this very narrow stack. She's in between books, and somewhere between 4:45 and 4:55, the killer approached, carrying this hunting-style knife with a blade that was 3.5 to 4.5 inches long, according to the autopsy report. Apparently, there was no scream and no effort to ward off the blade, as her hands didn't have any wounds on them, and she was stabbed a single time through the left breast with a knife while standing in between rows 50 and 51 in the library. She collapsed, knocking over bookshelves as she fell, and within minutes she was gone. According to the Center County pathologist, Dr. Thomas Mangiani, the findings suggested that the wound was inflicted with considerable force at the time, and he thought it was a face-to-face confrontation of the victim and the assailant, and that this weapon was held in the person's right hand. Investigators later said that it was the perfect killing blow. Now, even though it was pretty empty in the library, there were some witnesses there. A student worker at the time reported remembering hearing 2 short screams around the time Aardsma is believed to have been killed. But later they realized the screams came from the woman who came upon Betsy's body and saw her unresponsive on the floor. And the student worker also shared that when people found out what happened, students' imaginations started running wild on campus. Students feared for their own safety and had some pretty horrible speculations about the motive. Some said that Betsy was a sex worker, some that said she was a nude model for the arts department. These were baseless assumptions that are often used to discredit women in cases like these. And also, even if they were true, this does not mean she deserved what happened to her. Now, 2 students came upon her pretty quickly, Joao Uafinda and Marilee Erdley. They observed a man running from the direction of the commotion, concealing his right hand, and he said, "That girl needs help." Erdley described this man as being dressed in khaki slacks, a tie, and a sports jacket, and he had well-kept brown hair, was approximately 6 feet tall and 185 pounds, and may or may not have been wearing glasses. And apparently this individual led them to the core where Betsy was, where he pointed toward the prone body of Betsy lying in between the stacks and all the scattered books and metal shelves, because when she fell, the shelves had been knocked over. And the woman that found her began to check for a pulse, and the man kind of saw that this guy who said, "Hey, this girl needs help," was leaving. So he sort of ran next to him and attempted to chase him down, but ended up losing him. And the guy got away. And in the coming days, police would use hypnosis to get more details from Erdley. She described the man as gesturing with his left hand and that his right hand remained down and hidden behind him. So Erdley said that when she came upon Betsy, she didn't know what was happening. She thought she was still moving and thought that she had fallen and maybe she was having some sort of seizure. Now, she stayed by Betsy's side. She was trying to comfort her and was calling for help. And at least 6 people passed in the next 5 minutes, but none of them acknowledged the 2 young women on the floor. Finally, the assistant head of the library came, tried to give her mouth to mouth, but the interesting thing is that no one realized she had been stabbed. Because of the way she was stabbed, the majority of the blood filled her chest cavity and only a little bit came out. And apparently what came out blended in with her red dress, which is why the police weren't initially called, why the library wasn't locked down, and why people and all of their fingerprints and all of their DNA was all over the place. And ultimately, this probably is what led to the killer getting away so easily, because people didn't know a homicide had taken place. Shortly after, Betsy was transported to the health center and she was pronounced dead by a physician at 5:50 p.m. Now, this is infuriating. Before police had even been notified that Betsy was dead, the crime scene had been compromised because, remember, the library staff believed that Aardsma had fainted or maybe had a seizure, and janitors came in and mopped the area. They picked up the books, they fixed the shelves. And obviously, any physical evidence that potentially could have been left by the murderer at the scene was destroyed. Meanwhile, state police detectives headed for the house at the Milton Hershey School in Derry Township, where David Wright, her boyfriend, lived with several other medical students, and they basically filled him in on what happened. So what happened next? The day after her murder, police set up a base in a building on campus where 23 state troopers worked around the clock to identify, find, and interview the many students and staff that were around that day, just to see if anybody knew something. The entire campus was unsuccessfully searched in an effort to locate the murder weapon. They never found it, and a $25,000 award was issued for anybody that had information leading to his arrest, which is about $219,000 in today's money. Now, in the weeks following the murder, Penn State increased security and even created an escort service for women walking alone. They wanted people to feel safe, but despite efforts, no solid leads emerged. And it also sounded like there were some records that Penn State had and some documentation that should have been archived but weren't, and no official case file is available in the archives today. This book goes into a lot more of that about what happened and, what the author speculates happened to these records. Betsy was laid to rest on December 3rd, 1969, following a service held at the Trinity Reformed Church in her hometown of Holland, Michigan. Her murder ultimately became a major factor in the creation of a university police force at Penn State. During this time, the university had seen an increase in violent crime, in sexual assaults, and in raucous student protests, which at the time, they only had campus patrol. So her death really emphasized the need for increased public safety measures on the university's campus, and they created the police force in the early 1970s. So, who could have done it? There are several theories, but first, I'll talk about some theories that were debunked. And probably because I read so many thrillers, my initial thought was that it was the boyfriend. He was a med student. He must have had a good knowledge of anatomy. And for someone to kill her with just one stroke, they must have known where to aim. However, he had an airtight alibi as he was still in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour, 45 minutes away, and he was with people. The other thought is that Ted Bundy might have been involved because he was at Temple University during that time period, which is in Philadelphia. So it was around the same time of the incident, but this theory was later disproved as law enforcement did not see a correlation between Betsy's stabbing and the murders that Bundy had committed. And the timelines did not quite add up. This next one's crazy. Another theory is that she happened to stumble upon someone doing something untoward. When the police were investigating her murder, they had this blacklight. They were doing blacklight analysis in the stacks, and it revealed that the scene of the crime and the entire level 2 core area was allegedly covered in semen residue that had been collecting for a long time. And police had also found dozens of pornographic magazines hidden throughout the stacks. And just 2 rows where Aardsma was murdered, police had found a half-full root beer can surrounded by porn magazines, but apparently there were no fingerprints able to be lifted from that. So the question became, did she stumble upon somebody who was doing something to themselves in the stacks, and rather than be embarrassed, decided to murder her instead? To me, this seems extreme. It happened so quickly, within 10 minutes, and why would they have a knife, and how would they be able to get up and kill her so quickly? So the most accepted theory comes from the journalist that wrote this book, David DeCock, and he points to this man named Richard Hefner, who was a fellow grad student with a history of erratic behavior. And DeCock has an interesting tie into the crime himself. He grew up in Betsy's hometown in Holland, Michigan, and they ended up attending the same high school, although at different times. And at one point, the Pennsylvania State Police also believed that Hefner killed Aardsma, so it was a pretty credible theory. So who was Richard Hefner? At the time, he was a 25-year-old geology student at the university, and he eventually went on to become a professor at Penn State. Now, Betsy did know him, and Betsy's roommate told police that Betsy had spent some time with Hefner, and Hefner himself, even when he was interviewed, told police that they went out for ice cream, they went bowling, they went out for dinner, but that was back toward the end of October, so maybe a month ago, and that she ended things because she had become more serious with her boyfriend. Hefner claimed that he was still talking to Betsy in November, and it's reported that he was acting pretty strange when he found out what happened. He went to the house of his mentor, Dr. Lauren Wright, around the time of the murder. It was about the next day. And he apparently came there disheveled and upset and asked, "Have you seen the papers?" And I guess that's how he found out she was gone. But no arrest was ever made, as there was no physical evidence to link him to the murder. So there are some questions that still haunt me. How did this man get away? How did the killer know exactly where to stab her? And for one blow to be fatal, did he just get really lucky? Was it random, or was it someone she knew? And unfortunately, those questions are going to remain unanswered. And that was a case of a woman whose life was sadly taken from her way too soon, Betsy Aardsma. Okay, let's transition into the books. And when I was looking at books to bring to this, I was looking at unsolved campus murders, books that had institutional secrecy, misogynistic rumors, questions of motive, and I think these crime fiction novels would pair perfectly with the case, each reflect a different thematic thread of her story. And first up is the one that I thought of right away. It's Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This is probably the closest pairing, in my opinion. Bright Young Women. It tells the story of two women who are brought together by horror and tragedy, and it's based loosely on the real-life murders that occurred in America during the 1970s. You have Tina, who's trying to figure out what happened to her friend Ruth from college, who was murdered and taken in broad daylight at a crowded beach near Seattle. Pamela is a survivor and the sole witness of a series of brutal attacks in her sorority house in Tallahassee, and her life is upturned by a crime that captivates public interest. The opening scene for this one is incredibly traumatic. It's so well done, but my God, take care. Now, Tina is convinced that what happened in the sorority house is related to Ruth's disappearance. And what I loved about this book is that it gives voice to the victims of America's first celebrity serial killer without actually naming him. I thought it was so brilliant, and she had a lot of just really interesting commentary in here. I'm going to read you this quote here. She is talking about the person that did these serial murders. "There is substantive evidence that points to no plans at all, points to nothing but ego as his predominant guiding force. Representing himself was always about the appearance of education, of calibrated strategic thinking. The opportunity to escape arose as a byproduct of the status-obsessed actions of a man who failed out of the only third-rate law school that would take him. And then, instead of working harder, he cheated and lied his way back into the classroom, taking a spot from someone who actually deserved it. And yet, the myth of his mastermind persists, so a few Google searches is all it takes to corroborate the truth." So basically, her point here is that the people who commit these murders aren't often masterminds. They're just evil, and they're not special. These are just regular people who are evil. And consider this my own warning. The man was no diabolical genius. He was your run-of-the-mill incel whom I caught picking his nose in the courtroom more than once. But I really highly recommend this one. So many of the articles that I reference called Betsy bright and popular and the best we had to offer, and that is where the title of this comes, Bright Young Women. Now next is one that I know people don't love, but it's The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and I picked this because it is set on a college campus and a student is killed. And the administration seems much more concerned with image than truth, which could be true in Betsy's case. We have a female protagonist that becomes obsessed with solving the case. It's dark academia, atmospheric, and there are some Greek tragedy elements in here. I could totally see this novel tapping into literary obsession and academic power struggles and just working really well as a pairing. In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. There was an unsolved campus murder, and it kicks off at a class reunion, and that class reunion unearths secrets around students centering on this murder that took place years ago. You've got hidden relationships, you've got jealousy, you've got unreliable narration, and it's a pretty interesting, although I will say a sensationalized story. And Betsy's Murder was surrounded by student gossip and speculation, and I think this novel mirrors that tension and toxic rumor culture really well. Next is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and a murder occurs within a tight-knit student group in an elite arts program. Years later, a key suspect gets released from prison, and the truth begins to unravel, which they always say the truth comes out. So I'm wondering if maybe someday Betsy's truth will come out. This one deals with reputation, it deals with performance, it's got Shakespeare. There's a haunting what really happened that night vibe that I think mirrors the enduring mystery around Betsy's Murder. Next is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This one I think pairs really well because it follows a female professor at a university who kills men that she believes deserves it. This one deals with trauma and mistrust, specifically as it centers on faculty. It deals with violence against women, institutional failures, and I think it's thought-provoking when placed against the misogynistic rumors that surrounded Betsy's case. And overall, this is a thriller that I gave 5 stars. Parents' Weekend by Alex Finlay. This one follows 5 families whose college-age children disappeared during their school's Parents' Weekend. So it does take place on a college campus. And initially the parents are dismissive. They're like, oh, they're just being college kids, they're just being teens, whatever. But then when days pass with no contact, they realize that something really bad has probably happened. There's an FBI agent who investigates and uncovers secrets and lies about not just the students, but also their families. I think this one pairs really well because as they're investigating the mystery of what happened to the missing kids, they find other secrets about people that are loosely connected to it. There's also speculation that one of the faculty members did it, as they speculated a grad student could be involved in Betsy's murder. Girls Are Also Nice Here by Lori Elizabeth Flynn. 2 former best friends return to their college reunion to find that they're being circled by someone who wants revenge for what they did 10 years prior, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. And this one is a psychological thriller. It is such a page turner. It's got themes of ambition, toxic friendship, deadly desire, jealousy. And again, there's another murder that took place on a college campus and how really a tragedy like this affects people for years to come. Finally, I think this one is a really good pairing as well. It is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay. This one's a literary mystery novel that explores themes of true crime, justice, institutional corruption, and it's told through the lens of a boarding school murder, so not exactly university, but close. And it follows Bodie Kane, who is a film professor and podcaster who went to the boarding school herself. And she gets drawn back into it to teach this class on podcasting because there was a unsolved murder at the time that she went there in 1995. And as she investigates, she starts to really think about the original person that was accused of the murder and wonder whether or not they got it right. So the main character in this one confronts her past and really unearths things that people I think would prefer to stay buried. The theme is who society decides is guilty and why, and it reminds me a little bit of Hefner. And from what it sounds like, Hefner was a little bit strange and he had some very gross things he got into later in life. And I will say though, it sounds like they got really fixated on him, and I wonder if in doing so sort of missed out on potential other connections. This one also gets into victim blaming and internalized misogyny and perceptions of female behavior, whether or not she deserved it. And I just thought it was not my #1 favorite book. It did feel a little bit long, but it had an interesting storytelling style, and I think this one really is a good pairing. All right, so that is it. Tell me, what do you think happened to Betsy? Do you believe that the university tried to cover things up, or was it just poorly handled? Do you think somebody knows something? Let me know your thoughts in the comments about this case. And if you want more pairings like this, please subscribe to my channel for the next episode of Suspects and Stacks. If you liked this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like it, follow me, and leave me a comment. I put a lot of work into it and it was really, really fun. So I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Again, all of my references are in the description below. And if you have a case that you might like for me to investigate and bring some fiction pairings to, let me know in the comments. But thank you all as always for being here. I appreciate you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.